Well, hello there. Welcome back to another episode of the Unstoppable Dad Project. Thank you once again for taking the time out of your day to listen to the little podcast that we've got going on here. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome. I apologize. I have a little bit of a voice thing going on. I'm hoping that I'm not going to lose my voice. That will make my job obviously very hard. But as those of you that have listened before, obviously it's going to sound a little bit different. So I'm going to try and make sure there's not as many crackles or pops in my voice as what there could be. So thanks for joining us. As always, if you like what we're doing here, make sure you share it around. Anybody that you think might get some value out of what we do, share it with them, let them know, because without you sharing this around, it is very hard to grow this thing. So I appreciate those of you that are joining us more than once, the two or three of you that are listening to this or watching this on YouTube. I appreciate your time. So today, title of today's episode is It's Not a Problem Until It Is. And what today's episode is really about is change. And it's a conversation that I'm actually finding that I'm having with a lot more people at the moment. And it's just around where people are on the spectrum of change. Because in my experience, dealing with people in the capacity that I've dealt with people, which is in a gym environment where people are looking for physical change. They're looking to become fitter, become stronger, and become the best versions of themselves. And for a lot of dads, especially dads that have been, in the thick of it for a while, they may have gone from a state where they prioritized their training and their health to they didn't, which is a really common thing for a lot of dads because we put the family first, we put providing for the family first. And especially when, a new life comes into the world, which we're responsible for, we obviously have this heightened sense of responsibility where we want to make sure that that little person gets every single thing that they want and they need so that they can succeed. And there's nothing wrong with that, but at some point we do have to start to prioritize ourselves, and we have to start to prioritize. I'm probably going to come at this from a health level, but this theory that, or this, the spectrum of change that I've had this conversation with people about is something I think that is universal, and it can be applied across the board to any change that we need to make or we perceive that we should be making in our life. And the reason I've titled the episode It's Not a Problem Until It Is, because if we have this spectrum of change, and on one end it's like it's really not an issue at all, I don't need to change it, and on the other end it's like this is a massive issue and it needs to change immediately, is that when it comes to people changing an action, habit, or behavior that they haven't had to change before, or they haven't had to prioritize in a long time, or prioritize in their current situation, sometimes change doesn't actually happen until it gets far enough along that spectrum that it is a problem that needs to be addressed. It is very rare for somebody to change something unless they perceive it as a massive issue, because what happens to us internally when we're trying to look to change something? It's almost like there's a fire under our ass, right? And it's burning. And the flames on the fire may not be high enough that we're actually feeling any heat from it. And then some more fuel gets added to this fire. And then the flames get higher. And we start to feel it like it's a little bit hot, but actually it might be warm enough that I'm actually comfortable, even though it's a problem that I'm sitting on top of it, like over the top of this fire. It's actually warm enough that it's not a problem, and it's actually comfortable, even though it's not a safe space for us to be in. We found comfort in that action of being there, so there's that warmth there, and a little bit more fuel gets added to it, and it's like, oh, okay, it's starting to get a little bit uncomfortable, but it's not uncomfortable enough for me to actually move off it. And the action that I've got to take to move away from this is more than the discomfort I'm feeling at the moment. And then we add a little bit more fuel to that fire. And then for some people, it's going to get uncomfortable enough that they move and they make a change, so they get off the fire. But then for other people, the action of actually moving off the fire is still not is still not at a level where, or the discomfort of the fire burning is not at a level where it outweighs that they have to move. They feel more uncomfortable moving and feel more comfortable staying where they are, even though things are starting to burn. We're starting to maybe, get some adverse reactions from what we're doing. And then the next thing is more fuel gets added to that fire. And then all of a sudden we are on fire, right? Like now, all of a sudden it is at a point where it doesn't matter who you are, we have to move, we have to make a change. And that in theory is that spectrum of change, right? And there are so many people that I've spoken to and that I've talked to that are at that point where they know it's uncomfortable, but the action that they have to take in order to make that change is perceived to be more uncomfortable than the situation that they're in. Or they are so comfortable in that stage that they know isn't good for them, that it's too scary, it's too frightening, it's too much of a bridge to cross for them to move into the stage and make that change that they need to in order to benefit for themselves. And then by staying there and staying where it's comfortable, it gets worse and more fuel gets added to that fire. And then all of a sudden they're on fire and they have to do something. And from a health point of view, that can be like, I've got to make a big change from my health point of view. Maybe the doctor has told them to. That's a big one. Hey, tap on the shoulder when you get to, mid 40s, and it's just like, you got to do something about this. Otherwise, like, you're not going to have as long on this earth as you need to. And they've maybe known that for the last 5 years, but they haven't taken action on it. Even though it's been uncomfortable, they still haven't taken action on it. And now it's a problem. It has been a problem, but now it really is a problem, and it's a problem they have to take action on. And this is the thing, right? Like, I think what people get caught up on when change needs to happen is we have to approach the potential change in a way where the perceived action that the person has to take isn't dramatic, but it can incrementally start to shift things in a positive direction for them. And when a big change is needed dramatically and quickly, it means you have to take big action in order to get that change to happen. And when you get to the end of that spectrum, where it is a massive problem and you have no choice but to move, the action that you have to take in order to get that problem to shift back in a positive direction is going to be huge. Whereas when it starts to get uncomfortable, and I think in different aspects of our life we've all had this, and I can tell you now, like, I've had it on a lot of different occasions. I've had it with my health, I've had it with my business, and I can tell you that I've procrastinated and felt uncomfortable or felt comfortable in a bad situation so much to a point where I've had to wait, or I've waited for it to get to a dire situation before I've actually taken action. And in hindsight, when you get to there and you take that massive action and you can come out the other side of it, you look back and you go, fuck, you can kind of identify a point where if I'd have just taken some smaller steps and taken smaller actions at this point, I wouldn't have had to take this big massive action, and it probably wouldn't be as uncomfortable as what it is now. And it's a hard thing in hindsight to do, but one thing I've tried very hard to do is when it gets to a point, don't let it become a massive problem. Once I identify that there is something that needs to change, rather than looking at what big actions I've got to take in order to change, are there smaller, more sustainable actions that I can do to start to shift things in the right direction? And that's been a really big shift when it comes to moving problems. And when I'm working with people, around their health, when we first have an initial conversation, me trying to identify with them, where are they on that spectrum of change? Are they right on this edge where, like, hey, if I don't do something about this now, like, I'm in massive trouble? Or are they further back this way? Are they here where it's like, it's starting to become an issue, but I'm probably okay here for a little bit before I start, and then that can start to, that time frame starts to bump out and get move and longer and longer and longer. So if you've got something that is on the back of your mind and that you think you need to change, whether it be health, whether it be professionally, whether it be relationship wise, don't, if it feels like a problem, there's a pretty good chance it could be a problem. Don't let that problem get to a point where you need to take drastic action to fix it. Because sometimes we can let it get to a point where we can't actually bring it back. And when we identify those things, sometimes it is a good tool and a good technique. As much as you may be in a dark enough spot that you don't actually want to think this way, but actually thinking about what the worst case scenario is if I let this go on. If I keep neglecting my health and not addressing, say I've got an injury concern that I need to look at. I've got this niggling knee injury that never goes away. Oh, it's just old age. Could be. So I let that go. I let that go for 6 months, 12 months rather than getting it looked at or going to see somebody about it or starting moving. Like, I know I've got to do something about it. And then all of a sudden the knee issue gets worse. And then all of a sudden I've started to go back. I've got a back problem. Shit, now I've got a back problem and a knee problem. Oh, it's just part of getting old. Okay. Now I've got an ankle problem. I've started rolling my ankles. Now I can't do some of the stuff. If I've got a physical job, maybe I can't perform work as well as I want to. I all of a sudden can't run around after the kids without being in pain. Now it's starting to become a real problem. And then all of a sudden the back completely goes and I'm bedridden for a week. So I can't work for a week. I can't do anything with the kids. So mentally that starts to play on me a little bit more. And finally I'm at a point where, fuck, I need to go do something about this. And then you go and talk to somebody. And then there's a big road out. You have to change. You have to go and, see a physio once a week or twice a week for the next 4 weeks. So that's going to impact you financially. Then from there, you actually need to start to do some movement and some strengthening to get that working. Whereas if potentially when the knee had have started hurting, we had have gone and seen somebody about it, we don't have to take as drastic action. Maybe it's seeing the physio once a month and then adding in some form of structured strength training to try and get everything stronger. And then the back doesn't happen. You're able to continue work potentially in a better capacity. But because it wasn't a problem until it was a problem and we let that go on for so long, it is one of those things where we want to try for ourselves and for those people around us, if something is a problem, not let it get to that end spectrum on that change spectrum, where it's right at the end and it's a problem. And now all of a sudden what I have to do is such a big drastic action that may cost me from a time point of view or from a financial point of view. Whereas if I had nipped it in the bud when it first became a problem and there was first an issue, then maybe it's not as much of a burden on me as what it is now. So don't just put things off to not having enough time to do it, not having enough time to address it. If it's a problem, talk to somebody, seek some help. Because I know as men, we are all too often hesitant to reach out because it's perceived as a form of weakness. Doesn't matter what it is. It can be physical, it can be mental, it can be professionally, it can be emotional. It doesn't matter. I know, and I've done it in the past. I've been so guilty of it, where I don't want to reach out for help because I can get through this. It's okay. It's not that much of a problem yet. It's not until it becomes a real problem that then we reach out for help and we look to fix it, only to realize when we get to the end of that change of spectrum and we are left with no choice but to do it. If we had have just nipped it in the bud and started something earlier. There will always be a solution out there for you to do it. It may require a lot of discipline and a lot of willpower, and it's definitely going to require some action on your behalf. But if you've got a feeling or a sensation about something you think may need to be changed, it might be time to reach out and have a talk to somebody who is a professional in that field and see what maybe some small actionable steps are to change that. Because if you get the change happening early enough on that change spectrum, I can tell you right now that those small incremental changes are going to be less of an impact on your finances and less of an impact on your time. It doesn't matter what it is, compared to if you ignore it and you let it go on, and then it gets to the other end of that change spectrum and it wasn't a problem, but now it is. So, as always, reach out for help if you need anything. I'm here to help, I'm here to talk. I'm obviously a professional when it comes to helping people, reclaim their strength and fitness. And I have a very good network of people I can refer you to if there is anything else that you potentially need help with. Hey dads, it's just something that we need to do. We need to make sure that we look after each other. And that's kind of what this podcast is about, just to give you an insight into my experiences, the things that I've worked with people, that I've dealt with personally, and hopefully that helps you. If it does, share this podcast around, and we'll see you next week. Goodbye.